Okay guys, so today we are going to be learning about conflict. So before we get into our actual kind of lesson part of it and get into this, you guys should all have index cards on your tables. Okay, make sure everyone has enough. I have extra. So I want you to write down what you think conflict is. Okay, just your own definition. Could just be a few words, could be a sentence. So take a second to do that and then kind of compare with the others at your table what you think conflict is. Okay? Once you have it written down, and everyone in your group is done, you can kind of compare what your definition was compared to like other people, just what you think conflict is.
I just said it is
I said conflict can be an argument, conflict, or war, and many different things.
But it can't be specific.
I just said that forms and like
Wait, what's the other one? Person versus person, person versus self. I just put
person versus computer.
P, V, P, P, V, S.
Or like horror story or something. That was like the main thing.
Okay guys, so we're going to kind of bring it back to a class discussion here. Who wants to share what their definition of conflict was? Yeah, Eliza.
Like a problem, an issue that you're trying to solve. It could be a person versus person conflict, a person versus self conflict, or like a person versus nature conflict.
Absolutely, right, yeah. So many different kinds of conflict. Yes, hold on to that thought, absolutely. Who else wants to share what their definition was? Yeah, Maddie.
A struggle that a character is going through the story, and it usually helps move the plot along.
Okay, moves the plot along. I love that. A struggle that moves the plot. Yeah, absolutely.
Opposing force between two or more things.
Opposing force between two or more things, right? Yeah.
In opposition.
An opposition, yes.
An argument or disagreement doesn't have to be person versus person.
Okay, an argument or disagreement. I like the last part. Doesn't have to be person versus person. Absolutely. Okay, so keep this in the back of your mind. And now we're going to go to my definition of conflict. Assuming this works. Hey. Okay, so what is a conflict? In literature, conflict refers to the struggle between opposing forces. I heard someone say opposition, so absolutely. Opposing forces or characters that drives the narrative forward, raises the stakes and tension, and develops the characters. So we already kind of talked about, Hattie said moves the plot forward, right? So we've talked about that. Moves the narrative forward. How does it do that though? What does the struggle do to the narrative? Yeah.
Because normally it gives it a problem, and when there's a problem, the character, whatever in place has to get over it. So therefore, by trying to solve it, it gives them development.
Right.
Even if it's not a character, it
Yeah.
gives the thing development.
Yeah, if everything's just hunky-dory the entire time, that's gonna be pretty boring, right? It's not gonna be very interesting, absolutely. So how do you think conflict raises the stakes, or raises tension in a story? What does it do? Yeah.
It adds some excitement to it.
Yeah, adds excitement, absolutely, yeah. And when we think of like tension, it's like things get tense, right? Yeah,
It raises the stakes for the characters usually.
yeah, absolutely. And how do you think it develops the characters? How do you think conflict does? We talked about character development before with Miss Bradley.
Like the outcome of it can change the character.
Yeah, the outcome can change the character. So what happens after the conflict, once it's resolved, that can change. What else?
Based on what the conflict is, it could give the character like a trauma of some sort before it's even over.
Yeah, it could give a trauma. So the conflict itself could change the character, right? Absolutely. So yeah, this is our kind of general definition of conflict, but we can kind of dive a little bit deeper, kind of look at the different kinds of conflict. Everyone had different definitions that said it doesn't have to be one specific kind, right? So we've got two main parts whenever we look at conflict. There's external conflict versus internal conflict, very different kinds, okay? So external conflict takes place outside the body between a character and an outside force that stands in the way of the character's goals, okay? So some people in their definitions said some sort of force, doesn't have to be a person. Some people said like an argument, doesn't have to be a person, right? Some outside force. Internal conflict takes place solely within the character who struggles with their own opposing desires or beliefs. So external, kind of exterior, something's happening to them. Internal, more interior, something's happening within them, okay? But those are still kind of vague definitions. We've just got this kind of opposing force that could be anything, right? Or this sort of internal struggle could be anything. So we're gonna dive a little deeper. And we can actually separate external conflict into three main kinds of conflict. I think Eliza was hinting at them earlier in her definition, right? And then we're gonna look at one main internal conflict, okay? So first, this is the most common external conflict, okay? It's super popular in literature and movies, everywhere. So it's character versus character. So we've got two characters that have motivations, desires, or beliefs that place them in opposition with each other. So this can take many forms, from a physical confrontation between a hero and a villain, to a battle of wits, to struggles in a romantic relationship, right? So it doesn't have to be that kind of epic battle at the end, though you see that pretty typically with character versus character. It could be, kind of an argument, like someone was saying, or it could be something with a romantic relationship, right? And by exploring the different ways that characters can interact and clash with one another, that shows a deeper understanding of the story. So that's where we end up getting those more complex characters. That's how we push the narrative forward, right? So my favorite example you can see up there is Harry Potter versus Voldemort. I think we were actually just talking about Harry Potter a little earlier too. So this is like classic character versus character. We've got the prophesized, chosen one, good boy versus like the definition of evil in a character, right? He's like, Voldemort is about as dark and evil as it gets, right? So we've got our classic hero versus villain, good versus evil, but it doesn't always have to be that way, right? So can anyone think of another kind of character versus character? Doesn't have to be a movie or book, could just be a scenario. Something that's character versus character. Yeah, Fred.
Okay, so in Finding Nemo, Nemo wants to go and explore the world, but Marvin or Marlo or whatever his name was does not want that to happen because he prioritizes the safety of his only child.
Right, absolutely, yes, that's such a good example of character versus character, yeah.
In Howl's Moving Castle, Sophie is turned into an old woman and is trying to figure out how to turn back.
Yes, I love that movie. Yeah, super good. Okay, can anyone think of anything else before we move on? Character versus character. Okay, we kind of get it though, right? This is like our classic good guy versus bad guy. So another kind of external conflict. This one's a little more different. So this is character versus nature. This is when characters are threatened by a natural force. And the force could be some powerful animal, could be a storm, disease, any sort of natural phenomenon, okay? The big thing here though is that nature is a silent opponent that causes characters to reflect on their lives. This is very different than character versus character. even if they're both external conflicts, okay? Now, our opponent or our opposing force is not a bad guy with his own motives and his own dialogue and like, what a good offer. It's totally different, right? So now we've got like a wildfire or a storm. It does not care about the main characters, right? It's just there. It doesn't have its own subconscious. So instead of kind of opposing against this other bad guy, now our main characters have to look inward at themselves, right? This is why in a lot of those movies or books about nature, our main character is kind of reflecting on their lives. Maybe they're trying to help their family survive. You know, they're looking at their choices that they've made that have led them up to this moment, okay? So why do you think an author might choose character versus nature as opposed to character versus character? What kind of different elements are there?
I feel like in character versus nature, you can get a more in-depth look at the character it's mainly about, versus if you do character versus character, then it's going to look at both, you know, the villain, the hero, whatever it is. But if you're just focusing on one person, you can get a more in-depth view of them and just get more like complex.
Absolutely, that's such a good answer. Yeah, we get a more complex character when they're looking inward, right? We can spend a lot more time also with our main character. We don't have to develop this kind of bad guy that's going against them, right? So can anyone think of a character versus nature scenario or book or movie, something that comes to mind? Yeah.
A Long Walk to Water.
A Long Walk to Water. Yeah, absolutely. Hattie.
Like 90% of the I Survived books.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Movie Twister.
Twister. I was gonna put that out there, but I didn't know if people still watch that. So that makes me feel good. Landry, yeah.
The movie San Andreas.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Like island survival, like, you know, like plane crash kind of.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, any sort of scenario like that, you know, plane crashes, you're on an island, gotta survive.
I mean,
Yes.
this is kind of a goofy one, but I think Gilligan's Island kind of counts.
Yeah, that counts. Absolutely. Yeah. So we kind of have an idea of character versus nature now, right? Okay, so our last external conflict we're going to go over is character versus society, okay? So now the protagonist is pitted against larger forces of society. And these forces could be the government systems, anything like that, or societal customs. So the protagonist's beliefs go against the norms of society, so what's normal, or in their culture, or in their government. And this causes them to stand up for what they believe in, right? This is usually when we get those kind of rebellion stories, right? So my favorite example is Divergent, right? I don't know, how many people have read the book? No, see, I didn't think people read it as much anymore. Okay, homework, no. But seriously, it's good. The movie, so-so. But can anyone give me an example? This one's a little trickier. Oh, okay, maybe not. Eliza.
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games, yeah, okay, everyone's doing that.
How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah, absolutely, How to Train Your Dragon, for sure. I didn't think about that one. That is a good one though. Landry.
The Aragon series.
Aragon, absolutely. Hattie.
The Darkest Minds.
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of young adult fiction tends to be character versus society, right? We've got that main character who like rebels against their tyrannical, futuristic government, right? Hunger Games, those sort of things. Okay, so those are all our examples of different kinds of external conflict. We've got one main internal conflict. This is character versus self, okay? So this is when the character's inner struggles over a moral dilemma or their own nature or two conflicting desires happen, right? So characters go through growth or they spiral or maybe both, right? We talked about how sometimes a character can develop through their conflict. Sometimes they overcome it and they're a different person. Sometimes they spiral and they're a different person. Maybe sometimes you get a little bit of both, right? But it creates a more complex character. And I think we talked about it a little earlier about why an internal conflict might cause a complex character as opposed to just like a hunky-dory kind of character. Do we want to like elaborate on that a little bit more now that we're on character versus self? I think you hinted at it. Yeah.
I was gonna like give an example of something I find. I'm not sure if you read it. Have you read like the 13 Reasons Why like book?
Yes.
I watched the show and the book, and I feel like a best example would be Clay after Hannah, you know.
Yes.
Because it shows how he struggles with the death of his like best friend.
Absolutely.
And you know like his crush.
Yeah.
And just it like goes and it shows like the feelings that he shows, and eventually how he's also dealing not with the same things but in the same mental mindscape like she was.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good example. Does anyone else have an example that they want to talk about of like an internal conflict? Yeah,
Like in the Hunger Games,
Mhm.
like the prequel when like Snow is good ones and turns not good.
Yes, yeah, songbirds and snakes, right? Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example of internal conflict. Because the tension there at the end, it's really all happening in his head, right? It's not necessarily him versus a bad guy. It's like, is he becoming the bad guy? Yeah, absolutely.
Am I allowed to give one that isn't with a book or anything?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a musical,
Yeah.
and it's Be More Chill, and the main character, Jeremy, who's like very socially awkward and stuff, he takes these pills to make him more socially acceptable, and throughout the thing, it kind of blocks out his best friend, and he has this internal conflict over regaining that friendship or like becoming more popular and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. These are all great examples. My favorite, you can see up there, Elsa from Frozen. What is her internal conflict in Frozen? Brody.
Everything I touch turns to ice.
Yes, and because of that, what does she have to go through? What does she do growing up? And even whenever she goes, she isolates herself. I totally set you up for that, Brody. It's even in my notes to do. Okay. Yeah, she isolates herself. What else is kind of going on though because of this internal conflict? She has, these weird relationships with her family. Yeah.
She injured her sister when she was younger, and Anna's still recovering from that. She feels very guilty.
Yeah, guilt. Absolutely. Yeah. So what I love about Frozen, my little bit of Frozen trivia, because I'm an absolute Disney nerd. Okay. When they were first writing Frozen, Elsa was meant to be the bad guy. Elsa was gonna be your classic, evil, ice power kind of sister that goes against Anna, and she's just wicked, right? But they ended up changing it, right? So what would the conflict have been if she was the classic bad guy with evil ice powers?
Character versus character.
Character versus character. And just by changing it from character versus character to character versus self, we have an entirely new plot, we have entirely new character development, right? And now we feel totally different towards Elsa, right? I mean, if she was just the bad guy, we'd probably be like, kind of rooting for Anna to take her down or something, right? Absolutely. There would be totally different tension between Anna and Elsa. Yeah.
Something I was going to add on with another, I feel like one of the best examples of character versus self, which I mean, if you look in a way, it could also tie into character versus character, would be Darth Vader and Anakin.
Yes.
Because even though in the show, technically, some people consider them two different characters, it shows, I think it's the first fight or whatever with him and Ashoka. It shows how he's still technically Anakin, but that's when he kind of just changes into being a Sith Lord.
Yes, absolutely. No, I love Anakin as an example because the internal conflict is such a huge conflict that it does almost create two completely different characters, right? To all my Star Wars nerds out there, right? And then when Ahsoka came out, they built on that. They started making he had these red eyes, right? That showed that that was his dark side, but then he'd also be light, whenever he was Ahsoka's mentor. Yeah, I love that example. Absolutely. So yeah, character versus self. Sometimes it's my favorite because it's the most interesting, right? You get to see Snow, right? Is he a good guy or a bad guy? I don't know. Or with Anakin, absolutely. So it creates really complex characters, okay? So now that we kind of know all the different kinds of conflict, we're gonna do the activity. I'm sure you guys saw the pictures that were outside, right? Maybe you didn't.
Sure.
So this is our conflicts gallery activity. So there's gonna be photos of different kinds of conflicts from popular books or movies, and they're gonna be hung up in the hall. Goes down to the workroom and Miss Gillespie's room, so you don't need to go kind of past that. But as a group, you're gonna go to each photo and you're gonna write on an activity sheet that I'm gonna pass out if it's character versus character, character versus self, character versus society, or character versus nature, okay? All you have to do is write it down on the worksheet, but be ready. We're gonna talk about them when we come back in. So be ready to explain your reasoning. And there can be different answers, right? So maybe I think it's character versus society, but if you said character versus character, let me know, because there's lots of different kinds of conflict in a movie, right? It's not just one thing, okay? So I'm gonna pass these out. Also make sure that it's not just one person writing down answers, or you're not just running and leaving your group behind from one to another, okay? It's not a race or anything. And make sure everyone's names are on it, okay? And if you don't know really what the movie is about, or or something like that, feel free to ask me or Miss Bradley. We can kind of help, or you can Google it. But I love talking about them. I'm a big movie person. So. Okay, does everyone have a worksheet?
Yep.
Okay. Does everyone have a pencil? Okay, perfect. All right. So I think we're ready to go on out in the hall. Remember, we're just going from here to Miss Gillespie's room, okay? And try not to gravitate everyone like to just the first one you see. Kind of spread out a little bit so we can have some flow. And stick with your group.
Alright, this is everyone's
What are the examples of the day? Oh wait, oh yeah, we did. Oh, oops. I have not yet.
Conflict, what is
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that should be the only one I kind of like. I didn't want to mess with you.
There's a movie, so character versus good. I was like, I've seen the movie. Okay, what one is this? I think
So this one's open.
this one. I don't know. I know.
I was shocked by that. That was so good. You don't understand. Yeah, no,
I'm saying, kind of like.
Okay, so there's lots of different kinds of Twilight kind of conflicts that are happening, right? But
No, it's not
specifically
Thunder.
the first one, this is where the relationship just started. We know Edward's the vampire, right? And we know about Edward's the vampire, okay? And he's always kind of looking like looking very tortured and brooding and very like solemn, right? And then Bella is a human, and they end up falling in love, right? But the whole time, Edward, her blood smells amazing. Okay, so he can't really even be too close to her. When he perceives her, he literally runs to Canada for months or something to try and keep him from literally killing her. I would I think there's some internal conflict happening, right? When you love someone, but also eventually want to keep them.
It would be self.
Yeah. But also, yeah. Society. But you can say either. You can argue either. But and why do we think it's society? Because it's him. I was Jacob when I watched the movie. I was. Okay, so yes. So the big thing is when he, she might have just. The big thing is when he first sees her, which is what this scene is about. Okay, when he first sees her, he's literally like covering his nose because her scent is like so delicious to him as a vampire that he ends up falling in love with her, but also wants to eat her. Okay, you should totally watch it. Yeah. Well, see, that's not in the movie. That's in the book. So, yeah. I read the book. Which do we think after? The first one's kind of why are they with incel?
We did that one.
Oh my gosh, Eliza, you just been like, just moved up my list.
Oh, I would go down your list. I would go down.
You mean my kids have not watched this?
Miss
Your
Riley.
husband?
I would go down your list.
Okay, so that's what we're gonna do each one now. We're gonna watch the High School Musical. And I'm gonna make you like learn to get your head in the game song and everything. Yes! I'm gonna make you an Anderson like interpret dance.
Oh, yeah.
I put 2 as number 5, so I'm gonna go through and count.
What is that?
I'm gonna go through short
This child basically just needs to be because we're so lost. Me and her, we're like this.
I love it.
From the first phase.
How's it going? Okay.
Am I your favorite?
I'm gonna assume that it's character versus nature. It's okay.
High School Musical.
I am number challenged, so I cannot count. I cannot count. Yes, actually.
Oh no, but
These would be the ones to be on my page.
wait, look,
Yeah, let me
look,
know.
look, it's love. Jaws.
You have one. Yeah, as long as the number doesn't matter, as long as it's number title, that's enough. Okay. It really doesn't.
Jaws. Of course you said. My hand. Because they're fighting good sharks. I don't know. I've never watched Jaws. But it's like a lot. But it's an animal.
Well,
I think it's nature because it can't be character. Because characters are usually like robots are like technology. I wonder if the character is technology. I think it's
You all watch High School Musical?
yeah.
That's okay.
They never watched High School Musical?
What are we putting for Star Wars?
Well, that, if you don't like musicals, it is very. You don't like Hamilton? I made my siblings watch it last year. Yes.
Jaws, easy. Character versus nature.
4.
Number
One. I'm putting it at 1. That's 15.
What have you learned?
Number 1 was the Hunger Games. We're missing number 6. Character versus nature.
Yeah, let me see if I don't know where I put them.
Let's do next.
6.
Where's the next one? Oh, Hunger Games.
Yeah, I'm just playing.
This is character versus
It's character versus what?
Nature.
The Hunger
Because
Games.
it's nature.
Wait, what was Star Wars?
Favorite.
Character versus character. Person versus And then Jaws is the last one. I've never seen Jaws. Yeah, I just put in 6.
It's the shark eats the girl.
I named my camera.
Actually, the shark is a character in the movie.
So I just put down those jobs.
I'm gonna person versus nature, and if I'm wrong, I'll always fix it in there.
What is this?
Character versus nature.
We're done. We locked in.
How's she not coming to school for the profit? How's she coming to?
He has all of them.
That's taking them 5
At some point, when there's like some organization,
Okay, amazing, because I love Okay, Twilight versus Grace, better. Edward, this guy right here. He's vampire. Okay, super like introverted. I've never talked to him. He's a vampire. Bella's human. Okay, and they're in a high school. And this is kind of his face when he meets Bella. Because he instantly gets with her and what is high school musical? But he also is falling in love with her. So he literally has to like run to Canada for like several days to get her sent out of his nose because he wanted to meet her. But then he is also simultaneously in love with her. He can't stay away. Right? So you can imagine falling in love with someone, seeing them in math class, but then also wanting to like meet her. Right? So one might have maybe some inner struggles there. Right? There could also be other kinds of conflict, but maybe that's the one that I would kind of be looking at.
I love high school.
Perfect. Yeah, if you're done, go ahead and go back into the hall. Or leave the hall. I don't know what
Character versus society because Shrek has to challenge society. That's
Yeah, that is a crime. Oh my God.
It could be any of them, yeah. I'm putting character versus self.
There's so many different Star Wars.
It's just talking about I almost said a trilogy, sorry, the like 9 movies and 3 of them
Okay, so are you
What did you guys pick for that one? Like, what do you think?
I did character versus self. Because Anakin and Darth Vader.
Yeah, you can argue a lot of different conflicts for a lot of these. So, as long as you're ready to explain your reasoning.
Yeah.
No, the character versus nature because it's a
This is
short.
Olivia. Guys, oh my God, the
Okay, guys, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, so was that kind of fun? Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, so now we're going to kind of just go over them. And again, maybe one group wrote something down that's different than yours. Just be ready to talk about it, okay? So I'm curious about the Hunger Games. What did we put for the Hunger Games? Who wants to share? Yeah.
Person versus society.
Okay, and why do you think it's character versus society?
Because it's Katniss from like all of the bad government.
Right, yeah. Did anyone else put character versus society for Hunger Games? Yeah? Do you want to add anything for why that is? Or did you kind of cover it? Yeah.
Well, Katniss is trying to fix a problem that has been needed fixed for a very long time.
Right, and what's the problem? What's going on?
The government is corrupt and they are taking the society's children and killing them.
That's a pretty big problem, right? I'd say that was society versus character, right? Absolutely. Okay, what's another one? What about Shrek? Ready?
I would say that Shrek would be character versus society because Shrek has to challenge society's belief that a princess can't end up with an ogre.
Absolutely, right? Society has prejudice against ogres. He's showing they have feelings too. They deserve love. Did anyone else have character versus society for sure? Yeah.
I had society itself.
Okay, you also had self. Okay, so talk about your reasoning.
I would say society itself because we know he has to face society, but with that society comes a lot of backlash onto him himself with Namki annoying him and everything.
Right, yeah, he's also got some internal conflicts happening. Okay, did anyone have anything else for Shrek? They might have, man.
I had character versus society, but something to use for character versus character. When, is it Napoleon? No, it's the
Farquaad?
Farquaad. I don't know why I thought.
Lord Farquaad.
Yeah, is when Lord Farquaad was like, wasn't. I'm trying to remember the plot vaguely. Wasn't he like wanted the princess?
He wanted the princess. Yes.
Yeah, and I know there was like some sort of fight, or I know they had like they just did not like each other whatsoever.
Absolutely, yeah. Character versus character, for sure. Yeah. Lord Farquaad was definitely kind of the bad guy that we weren't supposed to like. Okay, So what about the kissing booth? Yes. Person versus person. Okay, why do you think that is?
Because like in the kissing booth, she ends up getting with her best friend's brother, and like her and her best friend have a lot of arguments throughout
Right.
the movie about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of arguments between her and her best friend. Okay. Did anyone write anything that wasn't character versus character? Did anyone write anything else for the kissing booth? We could also kind of argue that there was some internal conflict there, right? It's her best friend's brother. She's feeling really bad about that. It's hurting her relationship. Absolutely. Okay. What about Twilight? Yes.
Okay,
That hand went up
Twilight.
so fast.
Person. Okay, wait. Actually. Okay. I kind of think it's person versus person because
Okay.
I feel like it's like Bella and like Edward like against like all of the bad
Mhm.
vampires that are like wanting
Yeah.
to kill them.
Yeah.
And they have like that big battle in the last movie. So.
Yeah, there's definitely bad vampires in it, right? We've got Victoria, she's bad. So yeah, we could argue for character versus character. Did anyone have anything else for Twilight that wasn't character versus character? Yeah.
Person versus self.
Person versus self, yeah. Why'd you pick that?
Because Edward has to keep himself away from Bella, but also wants to keep her with her.
Right, absolutely. Edward needs to stay away from Bella, but he's also drawn to her, so he's got lots of internal conflict. Absolutely, yeah. What about Pompeii? What did we put for Pompeii? Someone who hasn't gone yet. Hi.
Well, I've never watched it, but I'm assuming from the title and the depiction on the front that it would be character versus nature.
Okay, yeah, and why did we kind of infer that from the picture and the title?
It's the volcano.
Volcano.
Very famous.
Yeah.
Vesuvius.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty famous volcano, right? Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That one's pretty straightforward, right? Absolutely. Okay, so what other one do we want to do? What about King Kong? Yes.
Person versus society.
Person versus society. Okay, why do you think that is?
Because a lot of people had like a and like they try to like fight him, and
Yeah.
so it's him against the other people.
Yeah, so like Kong would be the person, right, versus society. Yeah, absolutely. So from the perspective of Kong, yeah, it's him versus all these people who are trying to come and take over his island and take him back. Yeah.
Character versus nature.
Character versus nature, absolutely. Why do we think that?
Because the people that go into the island have to face all the dangers and stuff there.
Right, so from the perspective of the people, they now have to go against a giant gorilla, right? And this really scary Skull Island. Yeah, absolutely. So that's also where perspective can kind of come into play. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what about Star Wars? I heard some people getting really into Star Wars. Yes.
I have a few ones I can pick.
Give them to me.
Okay, so one I just thought about on the spot, like just now, could be character versus society.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. Okay, for example, I want to say they're not necessarily against them, but they do get like the robots, for example, in the whole entire series. They're not really against, but almost everyone looks down on them, like R3CPO, especially when they get sold on Luke's planet. I forgot what it was called. You can see how when people were just like looking at them, basically treating them like they were nothing. And another conflict, character versus self. This could go for Luke, basically everybody in the series, because so for, like I said, Darth Vader, he's still technically Anakin Skywalker. So when he sees Luke, he's conflicted. He's
Right.
like, well, I have this son, I love him, I want him to rule the universe with me, but also, Anakin's like, he doesn't want to harm him.
Right.
And in the last, or not in the last, I think it's the Last Jedi, where he cuts off, was it Luke's hand?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that definitely probably set him back. And at the last movie, also Last Jedi, you can see where at the end he takes off his mask for Luke to show him what he looked like, and he did the same, or I think he did the same or something similar when he was fighting Ashoka.
Yeah.
I think, and it just shows that he's having that internal conflict with himself being a Sith Lord, but also a father.
Absolutely, yeah. And whether you love Star Wars or not, like you all know it's pretty successful, right, as a series, as a franchise, and that's because there are so many different kinds of conflicts. There's so many complex characters. Right, absolutely. Okay. So were there any ones that kind of stumped you? Any movies where you were like, I don't know, could be this, could be that? Didn't really know. Yeah.
High School Musical.
High School Musical? Okay, what did we put for High School Musical?
On a person versus self.
Person versus self? Why did we put that?
Just because, like, Troy is trying to decide if he should play basketball or if he should go with Gabrielle.
Right, absolutely. Does Troy go the musical route or does he go the basketball route? Right, he loves to sing, but he also loves to play. Yeah. Yeah, Heidi.
We went with character versus self on this one, but I thought it was one that was just kind of interesting. Was Inside Out. Because it's like, you have all these characters that are like the main characters, but then they're also the mind of this other, like, you know, what is it, Riley?
Yeah, it's Riley.
They're like in the mind of her, so would it be her and all of those are her mind, so it's person versus self, or would it be those are their own individual characters?
Absolutely. I was really hoping people would kind of dive deep into Inside Out. Yeah, Brody.
Okay, in Inside Out, the individual emotions function as their own characters, but it would still kind of be person versus self because Joy has to like learn that Riley doesn't need to be happy all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the perspective of Joy as a character, right, there might be a different conflict going on, but it's all also happening inside of Riley's mind, right? So yeah, which way are we gonna kind of go with that one? Absolutely. Were there any others where you were like 50-50, could be one, could be another? Or was that kind of it? Were there any other than Pompeii that were so straightforward? It was like, oh, obvious, done, yeah.
I think Titanic because person versus person because Jack and Rose, like, they wanted to be together, but then Rose's fiance and her mom, like, they did not want them to be together, but then Jack and Rose, they do end up being together, but then Jack dies.
Yeah, absolutely. Carson's so
I think it was
sad.
person versus nature
Person
because
versus
it was
nature.
a natural disaster because the Titanic sunk. So I thought that it would be nature.
Yeah, Titanic versus iceberg, or is it Jack versus Rose and her family? Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Batman versus Superman.
Batman versus Superman. Okay, which one was that one? Person versus pretty obvious, right?
I never watched it, but I'm pretty sure. I think you can argue also character versus self in that because I've not, fully watched it, but I'm pretty sure there's probably a few scenes where either Superman or Batman's debating if he should even use kryptonite to,
right?
To even go against Superman. And I know in that movie there's definitely dialogue between the characters and themselves.
Yeah, so it's definitely character versus character, but there's some internal conflict there, right? Because we've got two good guys going against each other, right? We love Batman, we love Superman, but now all of a sudden Batman's winning to kill Superman. Why? Right? Absolutely. Yeah, Matt. Jaws. What was Jaws?
Versus nature.
Person versus nature. Absolutely. Yeah. What else?
Mulan. It could have either been person versus self or society, because she's debating even like going to this war, but she wants to help her dad.
Right. Yeah.
But society won't let a woman fight in their war.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. I love that. Could be self or could be society. Yeah.
Mean Girls.
Mean Girls.
Person versus person because the whole part of the movie is Katie versus Regina.
Yeah. Absolutely. Ready?
There's also a little bit of person versus self in Mean Girls because at the end, Katie has to be like, I've become the one thing I set out to destroy.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. And I love how sometimes we think, oh, it's obviously this, but I love that other people are saying, well, it was obviously something else to me too, right? So that just shows there's so many different kinds of conflict. There's so many layers to conflict. You could have a really big internal conflict in a character versus character kind of moment, right? Yeah, absolutely. So did this kind of help kind of get the mind turning about the different kinds of conflict that we can have even in one story, right? We looked at a bunch of stories, but people have been kind of highlighting the different kinds of conflict as well, right? Absolutely. Okay, so for what time we have left, don't feel like you have to finish this or anything like that. We're going to go into our digital notebook that we've been using this semester. You're going to go to slide 38. It's going to have directions on there for you to read. And you're going to complete slide 39, but again, don't feel pressured like you have to finish it if you run out of time or anything like that, okay? Yeah.
I would say, like, this is more like
Actually, no, I don't need it. Yesterday.
For something to be on last year, wired three, like all of them. Like I was talking about, like Star Wars, that has all three
Absolutely. No, you can. If I don't have a charger, she takes it in my Okay guys, so in this assignment, it's going to be connected to A Long Walk to Water that we've been reading, okay? So you're going to apply all the conflicts that we've kind of gone over in this lesson. We're going to apply it to what we've read so far, okay? And if you have any questions about the directions, please feel free to ask, okay?
So anyway, so when we start reading a lot, that's a
I
lot.
thought you said 2,300 for that other
Yeah.
one.
6,000.
You were so close.
What was it?
6,426.
So which conflicts are we thinking about over here?
See, I was literally just trying to.
Okay.
Versus nature.
There's definitely that in there, yeah.
Because of reliance.
Yeah, yeah. And there's gonna be lots of different kinds, right? So we might have person versus nature in some, but then in some, maybe is there ever times when he's feeling conflicted internally?
Yeah, like scared.
Yeah, when are times that he's feeling kind of scared or
What's his name?
when Uncle gets shot,
Yeah,
yeah.
what's his friend's name got a hit.
Yeah.
Eric.
And is there ever a time when he's feeling like really conflicted? Like he wants to do something, but he has to do something else?
Yeah.
Maybe when we just read the last chapter.
Whenever the men were like dying and
Yes.
they needed water.
Absolutely, and he wanted to give them the water, but he also had to survive. He was feeling really conflicted. Yeah. So those are the kind of things that we're just writing. And don't feel like you have to write a whole lot, but just explain what the conflict was and what kind it is. Okay? Make sure to give the page number though. Yeah. So don't be like to write a lot.
Why red and blue like opposite?
What are y'all putting for the first one? So, what are y'all putting for the first one?
I'm gonna put when Uncle got shot there. It's on page 63.
Maybe one red and or blue.
Yes, because they're opposite on like blue.
Red and blue.
63, you said? Internal? Scared.
Scared, yeah. External. I want to protect him. For Uncle getting shot.
Well, and sometimes there might just be an internal conflict happening, and sometimes there
It
might
could be
and
weak.
don't feel like you've got to put something in both.
He could be
okay?
weak.
Like no one to protect him.
Yeah.
No one to protect him.
Yeah, you could, but don't feel like you've got to fill in all of them. Sometimes you can say, maybe there wasn't an internal conflict in that reason. Yes. Why do you think that is? Also, if you want to kind of dive into, it's just asking you internal or external conflict. You could dive in a little bit more. Do you think both happen? Why do you think there's just one that happens? Which one is it? Again, don't feel like you have to write a whole lot, but just whatever your thought is for picking this conflict.
So Uncle was the only family that had left.
I said he would be scared because no one was there to protect him.
Was it?
Yeah, go back.
Oh, yeah. Okay, guys, so while we're wrapping up, while we're working on this, can you stack all of your content gallery pages at the center of your table? And all of your index cards, stack those at the center of your table, okay?
I forgot your name for a second. I'm not even going What'd you call me? I said I about forgot your name. That's what I about forgot.
Okay, but
Don't forget to stack your index cards too, guys.
I was really into heaven.
I'm listening. I'm actually gonna listen. When did it come out?
It comes to April 19th. See, April 19th, I'll be waiting.
I know, and I was like, okay, guys, can I have your index cards?
Hey, Miss Bradley. Miss Bradley. I'm gonna listen to one Taylor Swift song. No, the one that's coming out here.